Hello everyone, and welcome to a video that features a most interesting story, a story that went viral some 10 years ago. It's about a tournament. It was a chess tournament played in Vandoeuvre in 2008, and we will feature one game. It's Christian Bauer, a French grandmaster, against Anna Rudolf, and this is the event where Anna Rudolf won both her international master norms and women grandmaster norms. She started the tournament with a win in round 1, and now she faces the top seed in the tournament. It's like we said, French Grandmaster Christian Bauer, and it is after this game that this whole story begins. As it's quite interesting, we'll discuss it a bit later, but first let's check out the game. But even before game, we do have a nice photo challenge. It's a nice photo by David Lada, so best of luck to everyone. I will give you a couple of hints. It's a very good friend of Anna Rudolf, and also she is Anish Giri's wife. So there you have it, best of luck to everyone. Now let's check out this game. Already from the first move, the Grandmaster chooses not an everyday approach, he goes for b4, the Polish opening. We have e5, the standard reply, and now not going for bishop b2 immediately, but rather a3. And okay, we have d5, it's a standard, the most standard principle there exists. If your opponent allows you to take control of the center, then by all means do take control of the center. So okay, bishop b2, knight to d7, e3, bishop to d6, simply developing, c4, d captures, bishop captures on c4, knight g to f6, knight to f3, and we have castles. Queen to c2 by Bauer, b6, Anna prepares to develop the light square bishop, d3, bishop to b7, knight bd2, we have a6, Bauer castles, b5, bishop to b3, and now rook to c8, preparing to push c5. Bauer counters this, he plays d4, keeps control of the c5 square, e captures on d4, e captures, and now bishop to d5. Alright, we have bishop captures, knight captures, and now comes knight to e4, preparing to grab that bishop on d6, but we have knight 7 to b6. And now, even though grabbing this bishop might seem like a nice idea, knight c5 is also a very nice move, and the c5 square is a very nice outpost for the knight. So by capturing the bishop, pawn captures queen to f5 as the queen is attacked by the rook, queen to f6, and black is perfectly fine here. Queen captures, knight captures, and this bishop wouldn't have that much fun with all of these pawns on dark squares. It would be very hard to activate it. So after knight 7 to b6, rook 8 to d1 instead. c6, we have knight to c5, and here comes rook to a8. Here Anna decides to defend the a6 pawn. It's very important to note this, as this was one of the games where people started being suspicious about her using external help from some engines or supercomputers, that this move, engine never even mentions it. This is, the top recommendation by engine is actually bishop captures on c5. Either not bishop captures on c5, sorry, knight to c4. There are a lot of options here. Rook to e8, also a nice engine recommendation. Bishop captures on c5 is a nice engine recommendation, but the top engine recommendation is actually knight to c4. A very nice improvement on black's position, where white is not able to capture the a6 pawn, because now rook to a8 will come with a double attack against the a3 pawn. After knight goes back, knight captures on a3, and this is now a very beautiful and active position for black. On the other hand, also knight captures, bishop captures is an idea, but then after d captures, white would have a much better pawn structure here on the queen side. Knight here, we can play knight d2, knight captures, queen captures, and we would have this very nice pawn chain, while white's pawns wouldn't be that great on the queen side. And white's pawns are on the dark squares, but white got rid of his weak dark square bishop here. So it would be an alright position to play for both of them. But okay, rook to a8 by Anna, defending the a6 pawn. We have rook f to e1, and now comes queen to c7, pressuring the h2 pawn. So now you could play something like h3, it's what I would play. The Grandmaster decided to go for g3. The same idea, preventing this pressure against the h2 pawn, but also keeping an eye on this f4 square, not allowing the knight to go there. We have h6, and now comes knight to h4. Okay, preparing to bring the knight over to f5. We have rook f to d8, and now comes bishop to c1. with future ideas of maybe sacrificing on h6. Bishop to f8, Anna brings the bishop to help out with the defense on the king side, knight to f5, and now comes a5, as there are obviously no tricks on the king side. Pawn captures, rook captures, and now comes queen to e2, preparing to bring the queen over to the king side to join the attack. Rook goes back to a8, now comes queen to g4, pinning the g7 pawn. Now knight captures on h6 is definitely an idea. Anna moves the king, king to h8, and now comes queen to h4. With some ideas, now there's a triple attack against the h6 pawn, so perhaps there are some ideas here. But Anna says, no, there are not. Rook to e8 is played. Even though the engine's suggestion is king to h7, the engine would prefer if the king joined the defense of the h6 pawn. But okay, here I'm most likely, I have no idea, but the Grandmaster probably went into a deep think, as there are so many options to play here. You have to calculate everything. You have to decide whether knight captures on h6 is even an idea, if knight captures on g7 is an idea. So we're just going to cover some basic sacrifices here. Knight captures, pawn captures, bishop captures, queen captures. So does this work for white? King g8, we have rook captures, for example, rook captures, and now queen to g5. If the king goes to the h-file, then the queen can, of course, keep checking him, and this would be a draw by repetition. If the king starts running away, for example, queen to h6 check and king to e7, now white can bring another piece into the attack. Rook to e1 check, king d8, queen to g5 check, and now you have to block this, knight to e7, and now comes rook to e6. Most likely the Grandmaster found this move, as it doesn't allow black to capture it, because knight captures would win the queen, and also it doesn't give black all that many options. White has a very nice attack, very nice position. Black is up a knight, but those knights aren't very harmonious at the moment. For example, king c8, getting the king out of the way. Now comes queen to h5. Pinning this f7 pawn. If you capture, then of course you will lose the game, and after rook to f8 the game continues, but the engine gives this as a dead draw. There is no way for either sides to make progress, but I'm sure the Grandmaster spent a lot of time here. Another thing, aside from this knight captures here, you could also go knight captures here, but it brings us to the pretty much same position. Captures, 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 and after king g8 we reach the same position. Also possible after this rook to e8 move is to simply first capture it, and then after captures you can go into the same variation yet again. Captures, 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 and then we reach queen g5 check, where we can go into the same line. So although white can get at least a draw here, the Grandmaster decides it's not worth it. There's not enough, you know, fuel to power this attack. He goes king to g2. Improves the position of his king and waits for Anna's move. Anna goes queen to d8, immediately offers a trade of queens. We have rook captures on e8, queen captures on e8, and now comes queen to g4. This was basically the last moment in the game where the Grandmaster could have gone for this bishop captures on h6 idea, and after captures, 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 into the same queen to g5 line. But here he played queen to g4, and now it no longer works. Here Anna played knight to f6, attacking Bauer's queen, queen to f3, and now knight b to d5. We have g4. White doesn't really have all that much to push with, so he has to play something. G5, h4, g5, definitely an idea. Bishop captures on c5, d captures on c5, and now queen to e4. Here Anna says that her pawn structure is better. White has a weak a3 pawn, and he has a funny bishop on c1 that has to keep an eye on this pawn. It will be a much better position for black, but white doesn't have all that many options. h3 is played, defending the pawn. King to g8, Anna prepares to improve the position of the king, and now queen captures. Knight captures, and here comes bishop to b2. This bishop to b2, as Bauer will state later in his interview, and this interview was posted like in every blog and every famous newspapers in the world. Even the New York Times published this interview, but we're going to discuss that a bit later. He puts bishop to b2 as the losing idea in this. Not the losing idea, but this will cost him a pawn, and as they are reaching time trouble now, it will be very hard to defend this. Instead of this bishop to b2 move with knight to d4, he says the position is still playable for white. But okay, it's not really what we're interested in. Bishop to b2 was played, and it's very interesting that how Anna will take advantage of this. The important thing is the bishop on b2 is undefended. So let's see what happens here. Anna has an option here. Does she want to guard the g7 pawn by pushing f6, or perhaps go into some immediate exchanges? For example, knight captures on c5, bishop captures, rook captures on a3, bishop captures on h6, and now starts pushing her b pawn. This is possible, and might even work, but she goes for a different plan. She pushes f6. First she defends, and now she, after knight to d4 is played, going after the c6 pawn. Only now does she play knight captures on c5. There's no point in guarding the c6 pawn. For example, rook here, you simply capture and you've eliminated the defender of the knight on d5. Captures, and after knight captures on c5, the material is equal, pretty much a dead draw. So, after knight d4, knight captures on c5 is played. Knight captures on c6, and now feel free to pause the video here and find the only move that allows Anna to push for advantage in this position, and it has something to do with the move we already discussed. So, I will give it a couple of seconds if you want to decide whether to do it or not. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent endgame player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, knight to f4 check is the move. The idea is after king moves, now comes knight to d3, the square is defended by the other knight, and now you see the problem. Attacking the bishop that is undefended on b2, which is basically the defender of the pawn on a3. Regardless of where you move the bishop, black's gonna capture it, and then gonna capture the a3 pawn. And here, in time trouble, Grandmaster Christian Bauer was probably not very pleased with himself. He could have gone for rook to b1, which would make things a lot harder for Anna. For example, knight captures, and rook captures on a3. This would come with check after king moves. At least he would already have a king on e2 and already a rook on b2, not allowing this pawn to even be pushed. But here, after knight f to d3, bishop to d4 was played. And okay, rook captures on a3, threatening all sorts of discoveries. Knight b2, for example, winning the rook. Bishop to e3, now opposing the rook, and now comes the b4. Rook to b1, now you have to put the rook in front of the passed pawn. b3 is coming, the knight is guarding the b3 square. We have knight to b4, and now comes b2, as the knight from d3 is already guarding the b2 pawn. So if you look at this position and the position we've discussed, here the pawn is on b5, the king already on e2, a rook here, the pawn can't even be pushed. We have this position where the pawn is already on b2, and the white rook is very, very unhappy on b1. So okay, knight c2, attacking the rook, rook to c3, and then now knight to d4. Here we have king to f7. Also a very nice moment for us to mention that the engine gives knight e5 check as the absolute best crushing move, as king g2 is followed by knight to c4, attacking the bishop. I don't really have much to do here. After we play knight e2, attack the rook, here comes knight captures with check, captures, and now rook to c2, pinning the knight. King moves, and now comes knight to b3, and there is no defense against knight to d2. Either check, winning the rook, or if you move the rook, or if you move the king, the knight will simply go there just as well. Attack the rook, you will either have to sacrifice the rook, or move the rook, and then the pawn can be promoted. But okay, Anna has a different plan. It's time trouble after all. She wants her king from g8 to come all the way to b3. So the king starts his journey. King f7. We have king e2, now comes knight to a4. We have king d1, rook to c4, now comes knight e2, and now the king can come closer into the game. King d2, we have knight to b4, guarding all of the squares around the black pawn. King d1, and now king to d5. We have f3, and now comes knight to a2. Bishop to d2, we have rook to c7, preparing to bring the king over into the game, but also getting the rook away from the king. You know, it's time trouble, you never know. You never want your king and rook close to any knights. So, okay, h4, we have king to c4, now comes king to c2, but now knight b4, kicking the king back as it's check. King d1, king b3, the king is now very close, and now there is nothing to do here anymore. The king is threatening to come to a2, whatever you play, knight d4 check, king comes here, you have to give up the rook, or if you try something like bishop captures, the king will capture, and still there's nothing to do here. The rook is cutting off the king from the c file, you will simply play king b3, approach the rook, and it's all over. So here Grandmaster played knight to the c1 check, but it doesn't help. We have rook captures, pawn captures with check, king captures, and now knight to c3. It's a full piece up, so this is completely winning, but the Grandmaster decided to play a couple of more moves. Bishop e3 was played, knight cd5, bishop d2, we have king to c4, and now g5. As it is two knights, it's not a knight and a bishop, so there is a remote possibility that something like this could happen. For example, bishop captures, g captures, and after f4, for example, if black knight wasn't there, able to capture the pawn, then g5, and then if black actually decided to exchange all of the pawns, then after you get a position like this, then it doesn't matter that black is up two pieces. You will not be able to win this game, even if you can stop the pawn. Two knights and the king are not able to deliver checkmate to a king. It's a tempo idea, but it is possible in some lines where white actually has an extra pawn, but I don't think this is even close to such a position. But okay, perhaps that's why he decided to play a couple of more moves. g5 was played, h captures, we have pawn captures, and now f5, simply putting a pawn on a light square, not allowing any further exchanges. We have king to d1, king to d3, and now bishop to c1. Knight to c2 was played, bishop to b2, attacking the g7 pawn, and here on move 65, as Anna pushed g6, placing both of her pawns on light squares, finally French Grandmaster Christian Bauer decided to resign the game. So yeah, a very nice game and a brilliant victory against a Grandmaster who was at the time over 400 ELO points higher rated than Anna Rudolf, so definitely a nice scalp to take home with you. And it's interesting that after this win, Anna achieved 2 more victories, so after 4 rounds she was 4 out of 4. Here I prepared a photo. This is a photo of her and Bauer playing from this tournament. It's not a very high quality photo, but still, if we have a photo, we should definitely show it. And here we have a part of an interview with Anna. I will put all of the links in the description below. As always, you will be able to find an interview with Anna, an interview with Christian Bauer, an interview with the organizers, an article in New York Times. So if you're interested in the story a bit more, do check it out. But just to tell you a bit more. Here they say another participant in the Vandoeuvre Open, Marie Boycharenko, hinted us that some players were uncomfortable with your strong games. She says, yes, there was a trio who just simply couldn't believe I played by myself and accused me of cheating. The trio by names International Master Oleg Krivonosov, Grandmaster Vladimir Lazarev, and International Master Ilmar Starostits. They don't really know how I cheat, but they are sure that I cheat. Krivonosov was telling stories about nowadays high technology, and so I heard my lip balm became the most suspicious. Lip balm's secret technology, that sounds ridiculous. Will any small kid believe such a thing? Yes, ridiculous indeed. I usually went away from the board when it wasn't my turn to move. I like to go out to the fresh air and also to wash my face. Moreover, I played most of my games on the stage, broadcasted, so I didn't have to sit at the board to see my position. And yes, the lip balm was always with me. Kids, be aware, Ripka is in it. So after achieving 4 wins in a row, she faced Grandmaster Lazarev, and after only 11 moves, the Grandmaster offered her a draw, which she accepted. So as Christian Bauer said for his interview for the New York Times, which you are very welcome to read in the description below, he said that he actually believes that the other players were convinced that she was cheating, because first 400 lower rated opponent than Christian Bauer beats Christian Bauer in the second round, then continues winning. Then the Grandmaster Lazarev was obviously too scared to play against her. He thought she might be using an engine, so he offered an early draw on move 11. But then the worst thing happened in the final round. In the final round, her opponent refused to shake her hand before the game even started, and not even before the game even started, she had to leave all of her belongings with the judge. They inspected her little box with the lip balms and everything, so that's very nervous. That will get to you, and you had a perfect tournament so far. She also played a wonderful last game, but in the end she lost that game. And she also says that her opponent played like an anti-engine system, where something like B6, C6, D6, E6, or something like that. But yeah, like I said, you're more than welcome to read a lot more in the description below. And another very important thing is, Grandmaster Christian Bauer said that he never at one point believed that Anna was cheating. He just says that after this critical move, bishop to b2, that he didn't go immediately for knight d4 with an attack on the c6 pawn. He first decided to go bishop b2 to improve his attack on the g7 pawn. This was his critical mistake, and that he says that after this Anna played a flawless game, and they really had to move fast because it was time trouble and everything. There was no way for her to cheat, and that he didn't really think that her other games against other players were played with outside help with an engine or a supercomputer, but that it's very hard for some higher rated players to come to peace with that they have just lost to a lower rated player, which I'm sure you are all used to if you're playing online. Whenever you beat a stronger player, you are always a cheater, and when someone beats you, they are always a cheater, of course. So I decided to include also a description of Anna's profile on Twitter. There, among other things, as a chess commentator, TV reporter, freelance edutainer. Edutainer is obviously a word. It's like an educational entertainer. Not sure if it's really a word, but in today's time and age, definitely should be. Passionate and loud, yoga and Zumba aficionado, and there you have it, lipstick maniac. Chess international master and Olympic player. So probably she included this in the description so that her future opponents know that when she is using her lip balm or lipstick, that she is not consulting a supercomputer, that she's just a maniac. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There is a lot more to this story, a lot more photos to this story. All of it will be in the description below. A lot of links for you to check out and, impress your friends with your vast knowledge about this story. So yeah, I would like to thank N. Johnson and Agadmator's dog for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, most likely with a game from the Sinkfield Cup, or perhaps even Bobby Fischer story if I'm done preparing it. So yeah, thank you all, and I'll see you soon.